waves of destruction. They crashed ashore without warning. Tens of thousands of people died. Today on News and Review, Tsunami, disaster in Asia. Hello, I'm Carla Robinson. Boxing Day 2004 will be remembered as a day of tremendous devastation in southern Asia, the day when a natural disaster killed so many people, destroyed countless communities, and wiped out millions of homes. The world had never seen anything like it before, and it all began with a massive earthquake. The quake was on the ocean floor just off the island of Sumatra. It measured 9.0 in magnitude. That's one of the most powerful ever recorded. It was felt as far away as Somalia and Oman. The earthquake, in turn, triggered powerful waves known as tsunamis. Those waves washed ashore in India, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. The water literally tore families apart. There was also widespread destruction in Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. People simply had no chance. There is no warning system in southern Asia, so even hours after the earthquake hit, as the tsunamis rolled toward the shorelines, frantic efforts to warn people had failed. The CBC's Michael McAuliffe filed this report on what happened when the waves came ashore in Sri Lanka and Thailand.
Looks are deceiving. The force of Mother Nature is far more fearsome than it may appear. The tsunamis arrived as enormous surges of water that hit at the absolute height of Thailand's tourist season. As the waters surged in, people fled for higher ground and the airport.
I was sleeping, it was 9:30, and suddenly I heard a noise. I didn't know what kind of noise, and then suddenly the water came in the door. And within 2 minutes, it was up to my breast. I just managed to get my safe, open the safe, and grab my clothes and put it in the case, and the bed was swimming in the room. Everything was completely destroyed.
The streets are broken, the shops and the beaches, everything is destroyed. We was in Kadanoi, here in Phuket, and it's terrible.
The extent of the damage is still being uncovered, both in terms of property and human lives. Bars, restaurants, entire resorts were washed away in minutes. The waves, in some cases, drowned people in their own hotel rooms. Hour after hour, thousands of injured poured into hospitals, many with serious injuries like broken bones. If Thailand's death toll sits in the hundreds, Sri Lanka's is in the thousands. The same waves, the same devastation, but where far more people fought and ultimately lost the battle of man versus nature. With constantly changing casualty and fatality figures, what no one knows is how many people are missing, dragged out to sea from their villages, beach chairs, and pleasure boats around islands large and small, especially in Thailand, where it appears roughly half the dead are foreign tourists.
One point of clarification, tsunamis are often called tidal waves, but that's wrong. The tide has nothing to do with them. Tsunamis are usually caused by the sudden rise or fall of the Earth's crust under or near an ocean, but they can also be caused by volcanic activity and landslides. Tsunamis can also be very hard to spot when they're out in the ocean. They seem like small waves, but beneath the surface they are traveling at speeds of up to 800 kilometers an hour. It's only when the tsunamis get closer to shore and the shallow water that you understand just how powerful they are. They rush ashore, then like a powerful magnet they pull almost everything out to sea. India also suffered great losses. More than 8,000 people were killed. Tens of thousands of others lost their homes. Damage was estimated at more than $1 billion. But incredibly, India initially refused foreign aid. The Indian government said it could help its own people and that other countries needed the international help more. The CBC's Yasser Khan was in India when the tsunami hit and filed this report.
Along India's south coast, few are looking for survivors anymore. Rescue turned into recovery today as relief workers and family members began looking for bodies, and hospitals tended to those who were fortunate enough to survive Sunday's catastrophe. Among the worst hit places are India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands and the Bay of Bengal. The violent waters destroyed an entire Indian Air Force base here. At least 100 personnel were killed.
Out of the total 8 families, we just approximately 27 of us on this thing, only 5 of us who survived.
The tremor, it was very intense.
The survivors told their stories today to Sonia Gandhi, leader of the ruling Congress party. Across the bay is Tamil Nadu that has counted at least as many dead as Andaman and Nicobar. It is here that the water swept away entire families. Many fishing villages have simply vanished. In the city of Chennai alone, there are tens of thousands of survivors who are now homeless. There are thousands more in other parts of Tamil Nadu. And there are so many dead that seems like the funeral processions are rare. Up and down the coast, there are hurried mass cremations and mass burials. For those who are alive, the enormity of the task ahead is sobering. Drinking water is now contaminated with seawater, sewage, and bloated bodies. There is fear of malnutrition and disease.
The images from South Asia were simply heartbreaking. So much destruction, people who lost loved ones, and millions left with nothing. Well, all that suffering touched people around the world, and they responded in a big way. The CBC's Paul Hunter reported on the rush to help.
The message from the rest of the world, aid is en route. From Britain to China, tons of dry goods, food and cash loaded up and flown off quickly. From Israel, stretchers, blankets, medical supplies, oxygen tanks. And along with a disaster relief team, Japan prepared to send naval helicopters. The emergency effort is underway, said its prime minister. At the United Nations, an early estimate of the tsunami's eventual price tag.
The cost of the devastation will be in the billions of dollars. It would probably be many billions of dollars.
And so, the list of other countries sending what they can is already enormous. Australia, Belgium, Canada, Czech Republic, Denmark, France, Germany, Greece, Italy, Japan, Kuwait, the Netherlands, Singapore, Spain, Sweden, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States. Even Kenya, its own coast struck by the wave, is doing what it can for countries hit harder.
As we have a huge emergency stock in Nairobi, so we have been called by our colleagues to supply our colleagues in Sri Lanka.
In Sri Lanka, whatever's already on hand is already in use, but it's already running out.
They need many items of food and clothing. So we are doing that, and we are also sending medicine, drugs and other equipments, and our voluntary doctors are also going in teams, but it is inadequate.
Indeed, clean drinking water is desperately needed everywhere in the region. These French rescue workers already on the ground in Sri Lanka are trained in water purification.
Probably we are going to work mainly in water and sanitation, probably health, and definitely a mass relief operation.
Dealing with, as it is, one of the world's worst disasters, the relief effort is already headlined the largest in history, and it's barely underway.
Well, as the world soon found out, getting supplies to those who needed it the most was very difficult. Roads were destroyed, and some communities were simply hard to reach even before the tsunamis. As the days passed, the main concern turned to preventing the spread of disease and providing the living with food and water. And it was clear from the beginning the recovery would take years, even decades. The disaster also prompted Canadian musicians to do their part. They put on a benefit concert. The CBC's Cass Rusey reports.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a beautiful and historic night.
Historic indeed. Some of Canada's top musical performers, actors, comics, together for one cause, to raise money for victims of the tsunami.
Cheers, Canada, for helping out our brothers and sisters in Asia.
A phone call from Tom Cochran got the ball rolling. He called a friend who called a friend, and within days, Canadian stars were rehearsing for the 3-hour benefit.
This is the first time I think something like this has happened in Canada since Tears Not Enough, so it's really good.
Last-minute sound checks were made. Instruments were fine-tuned. Egos put away to help rebuild a region flattened by the catastrophe.
The magnitude of the tragedy is so incredible that I think it's brought people to say, what can I do?
I think everybody's just pulling together, and everyone's happy to do this.
Canadian singer David Usher is especially motivated to help.
I have such a close relationship with Thailand because my mother's Thai and I go there almost every year, and I've spent a lot of time on that coast as well. So.
Must be the ones who start to mold a new reality closer to the heart.
Canadians moved by hardship halfway around the world. Canadian artists mobilized to do what they can to help ease that hardship, one song at a time. Cass Rusi, CBC News, Toronto.
Closer to the heart.
As Canadians came together to help the victims of the tsunami disaster, some wondered whether something like that could happen here. Over the years, tsunamis have hit both the east and west coasts of Canada. In 1929, 20 years before Newfoundland joined Confederation, a tsunami hit the south coast of the Burin Peninsula. The town of Lord's Cove was devastated and 29 people were killed.
Alberni Inlet funneled the tidal wave 20 miles inland. Homes were flooded in minutes.
In 1964, a strong earthquake off Alaska caused a 4-meter wall of water to crash into the coast of British Columbia. The town of Port Alberni was hardest hit. No one died, but many homes were destroyed or flooded. Today, more than 40 years after the tsunami hit the west coast, there is a warning system in place. Canada is one of 26 countries on a Pacific Ocean warning system. But are we as prepared as we should be? Here's the CBC's Alan Waterman.
A tsunami on BC's coast is not only possible, it's expected. And it could be as big as the one that hit southern Asia last week.
The tectonics here are almost identical to the tectonics of Sumatra. We have an oceanic plate subducting beneath a continental plate just like they have.
Earthquakes happen every day in BC. Most are never felt. Tsunamis are much rarer. The last major tsunami warning went out 18 years ago. Canada taps into a U.S. system that detects the waves before they reach shore.
This is a test. This is only a test.
Dotted along the Washington and Oregon coastlines is an early warning system that blasts the message out to the public.
With the tsunami coming in?
But that's not how it happens in BC. Here, the Provincial Emergency Program issues a bulletin by fax or phone. It's then up to local communities to figure out how to move the masses.
Most communities are well along in their emergency planning, but I think every time we have an event like this, we learn additional lessons that can make our plans better.
On Vancouver Island, Port Alberni's plan includes an early warning system with a loudspeaker and siren, but it's the only town on Canada's west coast that does. Just up the road from Port Alberni, in Tofino, the tsunami warning system consists of notifying residents door by door. A series of sirens could cost upwards of $160,000. Some argue that would be money well spent for this popular tourist destination.
It's been in the works for a while. Hopefully recent events will help it along quicker.
We certainly should have some warning system out here that would enable local people to look after themselves and their children.
If an earthquake hits close to Vancouver Island, even an early warning system won't be early enough. A tsunami could crash the shoreline in just 20 minutes.
An early warning system in the Indian Ocean might have saved tens of thousands of lives, and plans are now being made to set one up, not only in the Indian Ocean, but in other danger areas around the world. In the meantime, the grim task of recovering and identifying bodies and repairing the damage continues. By the end of January, nearly 300,000 people had been confirmed dead or were still missing. As for the damage, it will take years for South Asia to rebuild, but the rest of the world is promising to help, and people there say they're determined to succeed no matter how long it takes. And that's News in Review. I'm Carla Robinson. Thanks for watching. People power. Ukraine holds an election for president. Then, after days of demonstrations, goes back to do it all over again. On News in Review, Ukraine's peaceful revolution. Hello, I'm Carla Robinson. Ukraine doesn't have a lot of experience with democracy. It was part of the old Soviet Union until 1991 when it decided to go it alone. There have been several elections since then, but over the years, people have questioned whether they've been free and fair elections. So democracy has had a bumpy ride in Ukraine. How bumpy? Just watch what happened after Ukrainians voted this past November for president. First, the people of Ukraine voted at the beginning of November, but the result was too close to call. So that meant another vote 3 weeks later. And that's the election that got people mad, the one that got them into the streets demonstrating and demanding another election. Officially, this man was declared the winner, Viktor Yanukovych, the candidate supported by Ukraine's powerful neighbor, Russia. But this man, also named Viktor, said the election was a fraud. Viktor Yushchenko said the election was stolen from him. Thousands of protesters agreed. And so did Western observers who'd gone to Ukraine to make sure the vote had been fair. Here's a report from the CBC's Nick Spicer from a couple of days after the disputed vote.
The flow of people never stops. Thousands upon thousands gathering in Independence Square since Sunday's troubled vote, gathering for their leader, Viktor Yushchenko. Today he asked them to join him for a march on Parliament to ask its members to disavow the country's election commission. A short walk up the road, but perhaps a major step towards democracy in Ukraine. What's happening today is the completion of our move towards independence, he said. More than ever, we need the support of Western countries, including Canada. But right then, Yushchenko needed Parliament support. Outside, the crowds grew and grew.
They're waiting for their members of Parliament because they've given up on their government. And so Ukraine may be going from an election dispute into a full constitutional crisis.
Not enough members of Parliament turned up to vote on the motion against the Electoral Commission. So Yushchenko put his hand on a 300-year-old Bible and swore himself in as president. A symbolic gesture, but the man is doing all he can to take the presidency, including meeting with Western ambassadors for support.
Canada was, in fact, the first Western country to recognize Ukrainian independence.
Canada's top diplomat in Kiev says, however, that Western support now doesn't mean Western meddling or a Cold War-type chill, even if Moscow has recognized his rival Viktor Yanukovych as the